For centuries, the world has marveled at the military genius of the Mongol Empire, a force that reshaped Eurasia under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his successors. However, hidden beneath the dust of history lies a powerful and often overlooked truth: the women played a pivotal role in the rise and rule of the Mongol Empire. They were formidable diplomats, warriors, and political strategists who wielded extraordinary influence. Today, on Timeless Mongolia, we explore the remarkable role of Mongol queens and the noble women in shaping the empire's military and the political destiny. To help us unravel this fascinating history, we are joined by Dr. Brunata Niklan, a renowned historian specializing in Mongol and the Middle Eastern studies, who will shed the light on this extraordinary woman who stood at the heart of one of history's greatest empires. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Brunata Niklan. To start our conversation, the Mongol Empire, like most medieval societies, was constructed around a patriarchal system where power was traditionally concentrated in the hands of men. However, historical accounts reveal that Mongol women exercised a significant influence in governance, diplomacy, and military strategy. What unique aspects of Mongol society allowed women to hold such positions of authority, shape the governance and the stability of the empire?
I would say that there is no definite answer to these questions. Instead, what we do as historians of the Mongol Empire normally is that we rely on the sources of the period in order to construct certain theories that we hope help us to understand better the role of women in medieval Mongol society. Now, one prevailing theory that has been put forward by some scholars is that the role of women, or the high status that women acquire in terms of politics, economic, and religion in the Mongol Empire has to do with their nomadic lifestyle. This theory explains that because in nomadic societies traditionally women and men had different set of activities or were supposed to do different tasks in the household, that sort of divided the idea of what men and women should do. And in the case of women, what happened was that because they were in charge of all the activities of the camp, that is the economy of the camp, the politics that you have to deal with other camps as well in Mongolia, while the men were herding the cattle outside, that will position these women in a higher position that will allow them to be more outspoken, if you wish, that vis-a-vis other societies that were non-nomadic. That's one of the theories that has been put forward some years ago. Another theory puts greater emphasis on the intrinsic characteristics of the Mongol Empire, of women in the Mongol Empire in particular. And that means that it was actually the specificity of the context in which the Mongol Empire developed that gave these women certain autonomy and influence compared to other contemporaries or other contemporary societies that the Mongols encountered along the way. I do not see a contradiction between the fact that the medieval Mongol society was a patriarchal and patrilineal society and women acquire a high status. It is true that men were entitled for the majority of power in the Mongol Empire, but that didn't prevent the women from acquiring very prominent outspoken positions and have their own agency in their own. And this perhaps has to do with the fact that women also play very important roles as wives, mothers, and daughters of these rulers in the Mongol Empire. So they were very good at using this position to acquire or to fulfill their own agencies, especially in terms of politics. And I think their family connections also enabled them to exert considerable influence behind the scenes and even in formal governments throughout the history of the Mongol Empire, and we have several examples of that.
Thank you for sharing great insights. The Mongol Empire saw multiple instances of female regents ruling in the name of their sons. The most famous being Turgon Hatun, who governed as a de facto ruler for the empire for 5 years before securing his son's succession. Given that most medieval societies resisted female governance, what made the Mongol different? Was this acceptance a continuation of earlier nomadic traditions, or was it a necessity dictated by political circumstances? How did these regions navigate the challenges of maintaining legitimacy in an empire widely dominated by warrior elites?
The issue of female rule or female regency in the Mongol Empire is a complex one. Well, there are many nomadic elements to the institution of female regency in the Mongol conquest. I think it is important to keep in mind that the first time that the Mongols needed a regent, that is when Genghis Khan died in 1227, and before or in between the period of the ascension of the succession Ogedei, it was not a woman who was put as a regent, but a man. It was Tului, son of Genghis Khan, who ascended the throne as a regent for these 2 years period. So the precedent for regency among the Mongols seems to point, the first time they had the chance to do it, they appointed a man. So where does this regency come from? Why the Mongols eventually decided to position someone like Toregne Hatun or Gulgamish later on as rulers of the empire? Why did they put these women? And in my book I propose that the practice of female regency may have been influenced by the political tradition of another empire, that is the Karakitai of Central Asia, a semi-nomadic Sinecized dynasty that ruled Central Asia before the Mongols and when conquered and incorporated into the Mongol Empire early on. The Karakitai had two cases in which female regents were appointed as rulers of the Karakitai before the Mongols conquered them. And they have adopted that, I suggest, inspired in this previous empire. So when the Mongols conquered the Karakitai and they needed to replace Ogedei, who died, and they have to wait until the son comes back from the front, they saw no contradiction in appointing Toregne Hatun as the ruler. That's a theory that I developed, that there still might be a lot to say about it. But like I said, it doesn't seem to be a tradition that comes directly from the Mongols, but in my view, this might have been taken from the Karakitai. Now, I have to say that also it is important to explain why women might have also achieved this very high position. One is where they took the institution, and the other one has to understand how these women could be, how women can have such a high position. A number of women in the Mongol Empire had their own ordos or camps, which are this encampment that consists on hundreds of people, livestock, and wealth, which gave them both economic autonomy and political leverage to perform their own political agency. And this autonomy enabled many of these women to navigate the political landscape of the Mongol Empire and maintain influence in the empire power structure. Additionally, many of these noble women serve as crucial legitimators, as I said before, for their sons and husbands, and further solidifying the influence that these women had in the politics of the empire. So at the moment of a crisis, these women were just one more actor, very influential political actor in the empire. So it makes sense that they might have come to power because of that. And for that reason is, I think, also we need to include the individual factor in here. So we have a setup of very influential, powerful women, but also we cannot deny the individual abilities of some of these women in not only acquiring the regency or the throne, but also keeping it. And in that case, I think Toregne Hatun, for example, is a good example of a very skillful woman that managed to govern as a ruler of the Mongol Empire for 5 years and secure the throne for her son eventually, Gojek, later on. Other regents were not that successful. For example, Ogulgamish couldn't sustain longer her regency than 2 years and was removed from office by a coup that will eventually change the dynastic history of the empire. So I guess, like in any political system, individual skills and the circumstances play also a significant role in determining who and when can rule. And finally, I would say that I think it's important to mention that after the empire divided in 1260, women sort of stop or gradually stop to be regents or to have this very outspoken political role. At least in the western part of the empire, that is the ones that I work the most, there is only one case, one exception, very much at the end of the Mongol rule in Iran, where a woman called Sati Bek was elevated to the throne, put as regent of the Ilkhanate, but only lasted for 9 months, and she played more like a puppet ruler role for male, that positioned her at the moment of division and a moment where they couldn't find a proper male prince who could have the enough legitimacy to claim the role. So that's when Sati Bek was positioned to the throne, but it generally has been seen as an exception rather than the rule. After the 1260s, when the Tulis come to power, we have very, very limited evidence of women acting as regents in the empire.
Continuing on, could you tell us what sparked your interest in exploring the role of a woman in Mongol Empire?
Well, I personally got interested in the Mongol Empire when I moved to London to do my master there, and I was doing the history of Iran, and I came to know about the role of these women in the Mongol Empire. I found it fascinating, and I couldn't find enough research about them. So for that reason, I decided to embark on a PhD studying the topic. And I suppose because before that, I studied in Barcelona in a department where there was a very special interest in the history of women, that sort of was somewhere there. And when I noticed that there was a lot of research to be done on the history of women in the Mongol Empire, that sort of clicked, and I decided to do my PhD on the history of the women in the Mongol Empire.
Your work has significantly contributed to knowledge about women in the Mongol Empire. For our viewers who are eager to delve deeper into this subject, what resources would you recommend?
Well, in order, it's difficult to recommend books on the Mongols. There have been a lot of scholarly attention in the last few years. But if people want to know more about the women in the Mongol Empire, I will recommend Anne Broadbridge's book, Women and the Making of the Mongol Empire, with Cambridge University Press. It's an excellent book that came out 1 year after mine. Would also recommend mine if someone is interested in women in Mongol Iran, the Khattuns, and that's with Edinburgh University Press. So I think at the moment these two are the two books that deal mostly with the history of Mongol Empire. However, there are a lot of young scholars working on the topic of women in the Mongol Empire. Luckily, I think this is great news, and I hope that soon enough there will be a lot more material, discussions, and a new insight into the role of women in the Mongol Empire. As for the Mongol Empire more broadly, I think some of the articles in the recently published The Mongol World, edited by Timothy May and Michael Hope, with Routledge is a good place to start if you want to know more about the Mongols. The 2 volumes of the Cambridge History of the Mongol Empire that were published 2 years ago is also very, very useful. This was edited by Michal Biran and Kim Hodong. And more recently, I would recommend not necessarily young women, but on a specific, I would recommend Marie Favreau's book, The Horde, that came out a couple of years ago, specifically mostly on the Golden Horde, but she also discussed a lot on the Mongol more broadly. And Johnny Bragg's in An Astrolab for the Khan is a very interesting new book on the religion in the Ilkhanate, for example, if you are interested more in the western part of the empire.
A heartfelt thank you to Dr. Bruno de Nicolo for sharing your expertise. Your insights have been invaluable. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. Stay tuned for more episodes of Timeless Mongolia, where we continue to uncover the fascinating stories of Mongolia's past and its enduring legacy.